Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea, and it's a glorious Wednesday here. Great stuff to talk about coming into us at the world of movies and all that type of good stuff. And you guys being here to talk about films with other film fans, there's nothing greater in the world than doing stuff like that. Okay, guys, here's how today's show's going to go. I have picked out 5 topics from emails that you guys have sent in to me. Here's how you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show. You simply email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Send that on in. Make sure you put the word topic in the subject line. Put the word topic in the subject line. And as always, guys, keep those emails as short as possible, absolutely 90 words or less, okay? So keep them as short as possible, otherwise I just won't even be able to fit them on the screen. Now, once we get through that part of the show, we talk about those topics, I'm going to go to you guys who are watching live, and I'm going to take your live comments and questions here on the show. Here's how you'll get a live comment or question in. You're simply going to wait until I say it's time to start sending them in, but then start tweeting me at John Campea. Just simply tweet me at John Campea, and then I will go through just as many of those live tweets as I possibly can, and maybe you'll see your tweet pop up here on the bottom of the screen. All right. So, with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the first question today. And the first question today comes to us from Jermaine Sneed, who writes, I know things in the DCEU are up in the air. However, normally Warner Brothers / DC has not loved characters in TV and film. And Arrow almost seems to be dropping a backdoor pilot for Deathstroke right now. With possible DCEU movies with the character, is a TV show really likely? All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And what he's asking and talking about is that on the television show Arrow, which has had a bumpy road, on the television show Arrow, they just brought back one of the best things they've ever had on the show, which was Manu Bennett playing Deathstroke. And the couple of episodes, I really think that Stephen Amell and Manu Bennett on screen have an incredible chemistry. I just love their chemistry, and I love Manu Bennett as Deathstroke. He does a great Deathstroke. I totally know why. You got to keep the TV and the movie universes separate. I know why. I have totally no problem with the fact that they're not using him in the movies as Deathstroke. That's totally fine. But he does a great job as that. And they just did a couple of an episode arc with Deathstroke on Arrow this season. That, if you wanted to think, it almost looked like they were creating, like Mr. Sneed said in his email, a backdoor opening for a Deathstroke pilot to do a Deathstroke show. Now, Manu did talk about, and you know, by the way, full disclosure, I know Manu. This is him trying to choke me out at my panel at Comic-Con a couple of Comic-Cons ago. He's actually a very good guy. So Manu recently had talked about, in certain interviews, that there has been some conversations between him and Greg Berlanti, who's like one of the head guys of their television universe. And just some conversations, he said, not like official talks, but conversations about what could a Deathstroke show be like. What would that do? What would they do? Where are some of the directions they could go in? And he said some of the ideas were actually pretty exciting, but I mean, who knows? I think they're going to have to wait and see what happens in the movie universe and what goes on and all that kind of stuff and yada, yada, yada. So as far as I know, that's as far as it goes. There haven't been any real further serious discussions about a Deathstroke TV show on CW. I know I would go for it. The thing is, it'd have to be real violent, because the Deathstroke stuff that they've been doing on Arrow has been extremely violent. He's dropping a lot of bodies, like a lot of bodies. And I guess on CW, they feel like they can get away with the odd episode that has a scene like that. I don't know if they would feel they could have a series, but I don't know if CW feels like they could have a Punisher on CW, right? So maybe it's something they would have to produce but then air on another network. I don't know. But as far as I know, that's as far as it's gone. So we are not imminently about to find out there's a Deathstroke show, as far as I know. That's not about to happen. I don't know that they did those episodes on Arrow as a backdoor way of getting a Deathstroke series put to air. From right now, it just sounds like it's just a lot of talk and a lot of conversations, and that's great. 99% of those never go anywhere. But for me, I'd dig a Deathstroke TV show with, with Manu in there, and then having the odd appearance by Flash and Stephen Amell as Arrow. things like that, keep that universe tied together. But there seem to be some big roadblocks in the way. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how that all turns out. All right. Thanks for the question. The next question today comes to us from Charlie Zicari, who writes, tune in every day. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. I appreciate that. Want to get your perspective on John Lasseter's situation at Pixar. Well, here we go. Chances he'll return, and chances another leader will be brought in, perhaps with Bob Iger's successor. Thanks a lot for the question, man. And yeah, I mean, as this whole situation continues on more and more and more, it looks like the next name is dropped, which is John Lasseter. Now, let me preface all this with a couple of contradictory disclaimers, okay? Disclaimer number one. At least, there's part of me that feels at least relieved when I saw that John Lasseter's name, who is somebody I admire in this, from what he's done for the industry, all right, that I admire professionally so much. There was a part of me that was relieved when I first saw his name being brought up in this type of stuff. There was a part of me that was relieved that, oh my God, at least it wasn't like a Harvey Weinstein situation where there are people coming out saying he, pinned, female Pixar employees against the wall and threatened them and said, you'll have no job unless you let me do this or that, or he never raped anybody. I was very happy and relieved to hear that. So that's, like little asterisk number one, okay? Asterisk number two, before I preface all my comments here, is a contradictory asterisk, which, harassment is harassment. And making somebody feel uncomfortable is making somebody feel uncomfortable. It's different from this. It's much different from this. This is Harvey Weinstein crap over here. That's different. But this is still unacceptable over here. So there are my two contradictory, as I preface what I'm going to say here. I think it was the right move for Lasseter and Disney to decide for Lasseter to step down. Now, supposedly it's temporary. Like, I believe it's going to be categorized as a leave of absence for 6 months. So John Lasseter is taking a 6-month leave of absence. Now, in his statement that he put out to Pixar employees, he qualified it as, I'm very sorry to any, female workers who worked here for any unwanted hugs and things like that, blah, blah. He seemed to make it sound like it was incredibly minor on that level. From what I've read about certain accusations, it's a little bit more of that. Not horrendously more than that, but a little bit more than that, which is unacceptable. So the question is, well, what happens now? Okay, he's taking a 6-month leave of absence. He is publicly humiliated. I mean, let's not get around this. I mean, he's been publicly humiliated. And that's all of his own doing. But what happens after 6 months? What should happen after 6 months? I mean, I don't know. Honestly, my gut feeling is he is not coming back. And I think both he and Disney have already decided that he's not coming back. And to try to, soften the PR blow right now, they're just saying it's a 6-month sabbatical. And I could be totally wrong about this. Maybe in 6 months he does come back and he works through therapy and he goes through things and he makes contrition to the people he's offended. And who knows? That can all happen. Absolutely. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be a great little redemption story? That would be awesome. However, I don't think that's what's happening. What I probably think is happening right now, if I had to put $5 down, I'm probably putting my $5 on that he and Disney have already arranged that he's gone. They're going to call it a 6-month sabbatical right now because we got Coco opening this weekend, which, by the way, John Lasseter did not direct or anything like that, but still, he's head of Pixar. So we got Coco opening up this week. I think it was a lot softer just for him to put out that letter and say, I'm taking a 6-month sabbatical, than the headlines that would have read if they just ousted him out of Pixar and Disney and all that kind of stuff. From a professional point of view, I mean, what is there left for John Lasseter to do professionally? I mean, he's guided Disney animation back to prominence. He built and was one of the main guiding hands in building Pixar animation to what it is today. He's been one of the biggest, most influential people in Hollywood. I mean, really, so from a professional point of view, what's left for him to do? He's won Oscars. He's done everything in the business. And now he knows even if he comes back now, and even if he sits down and reconciles with each individual employee at Pixar that he offended, and got their blessing to come back, and even if all that happened, you know, and the sky was a shiny blue and diamond dust fell from the air. Like if all the perfect things lined up and everything right happened, I think he knows he'd still be radically scrutinized if he came back. And he's got nobody to blame for that but himself. I think he knows he'll be under the microscope. He'll get blasted. There's going to be a lot of negative stuff that'll be thrown at him. And I think he knows that. And I think he and Disney have probably just decided, okay, he's done. We're going to start by calling it a 6-month sabbatical. And then around month 4, month 5, John Lasseter is going to put out some kind of statement that just says, you know, these last 6 months have been a really good, refreshing time for me. I've realized it's time for me to move on to the next chapter of my life. I've been missing out on some things. I want to spend time with my family and my grandkids. I don't know if he has grandkids, but I want to spend time with my family and grandkids. And they're going to put out a statement like that makes it look like, oh, it's now his decision to step away, when really I think decisions probably have been made right now. So it is not, you know, as a Pixar fan, I don't want to hear this. But here it is, and it's got to be dealt with, and it's a shame to hear about it. It's unfortunate, but, you know, at the end of the day, nobody snuck into his office and hid something in his desk that got found, and now there's a thing. This is something he brought on himself, so it's unfortunate. It looks like they found a way for him to step away and leave with a little bit of dignity. But yeah, he's being kicked out of that position of one of the most powerful person in the entertainment business. And again, he's got nobody to blame but himself for that. All right, harsh one. Let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Gabriel Soto, who writes, "Hey, John, every studio is making their own streaming service like Disney or DC. I think this is a problem. This will be so expensive, not everyone will be able to afford it. This could increase piracy, but I don't know. What are your thoughts about this? Thanks a lot, man." And you know what? I am one of the earliest cord cutters. Like way back in there. I think it was like, I haven't had cable in like 6 or 7 years. Like once I moved to LA was when the Roku came out, and it's like, you could, wait a minute, you can stream Netflix movies on Roku? They didn't have a huge selection at the time. But to me, it was like, oh my God, this is the future. I bought that Roku One, and I plugged in, and I instantly canceled my cable, and I've been a cable cutter ever since. The promise, of course, with the new streaming and like things being done online and all that kind of stuff was that we're going to get rid of these huge, unnecessarily huge cable bills and being a prisoner to the cable companies and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a bright, glorious new era. And for a while, it has been. I mean, I've been getting all of my entertainment needs at home met with Hulu, Netflix, and a little bit of Amazon Video, because I'm an Amazon Prime member, so that means I get a lot of free video on Amazon as well. And that has really met pretty much all of my streaming services needs. Then every once in a while I met some free TV, but there's so many services now that stream free TV to you. Like I use Sling, I use the DirecTV streaming service. So when NFL games are on, I can still watch my NFL games and it's all met, and it's all still been cheaper than what I used to pay 6-7 years ago for a cable bill. It's still cheaper. However, some people that I admit I kind of ignored, some people starting years ago started saying, you know what, you may think this is saving us money now, but eventually this is all going to end up being more expensive than us just having the cable companies. And people like me were like, ha, pshaw. This is the glorious new internet age that will never happen away with you, naysayer. I mean, that was me and a lot of other people. But what are we starting to see? Now, we've got a lot of these must-see TV shows are strewn across all types of pay networks. You know, Starz has shows that people really, really want to see. Showtime has shows people really, really want to see. HBO has shows people really, really want to see. Netflix originals, Hulu originals, Amazon originals, Crackle has originals now that if you want to watch those, like which network is it again that has Get Shorty? One of the networks has Get Shorty, the new TV show, and it looks amazing, but I don't have that network. And now you're having to pay more and more. And now Disney's coming out with their own thing. Warner Brothers is coming out with a couple things of their own. By the time this is all said and done, there's a danger here. I'm not saying this is automatic, but now I'm realizing there is a danger here that we as consumers are going to be faced with the dilemma that we're just going to have to accept there's some shows we can't watch because we can't afford to pay $100 a month in all these various subscription services to watch everything, which will in turn, you know, quid pro quo, turn into piracy. That's going to create a new environment for uptick in piracy. I really think, and I think this is part of the growing pains of this industry. It's a part of the growing pains, right? You go through certain cycles, you go through certain stages. I hope that at some point they all realize this doesn't function as a good consumer model. We need, and then maybe Warner Brothers and Disney and Viacom and a few of the big media companies, get together and say, kind of like the way a lot of the media companies are the ones who created Hulu in the first place. Maybe another bunch of media companies come together and say, okay, we need to create a service that people can pay for where they can get all of our content without the big price tags of getting all the individual streaming services while still providing them value and still making us big money. And I think they'll probably come up with a way for that in the future. But right now, yeah, like I said, there's stuff I want to watch on Crackle, Stars, Showtime, HBO, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. We got Disney streaming coming. We got a couple of Warner Brothers ones coming. We're going to have like 15 streaming services that we all have to have. And it's going to end up being way more expensive than cable ever was. It's frustrating. And I think it's going to get harder before it gets better, unfortunately, for us consumers. And then there's going to have to become another alternative to this one. But yeah, right now it's kind of a pain. It really is a pain. All right, let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Anthony Secco. And Anthony Secco writes, why is everyone saying that DC is done because of Justice League? They have to reboot. They have to start fresh, etc. Well, just because a movie doesn't do great doesn't mean you have to reboot. What about franchises like Mission Impossible, 007, etc.? They just continue. Why is this any different? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Anthony. On the surface, I totally get where you're coming from. And you're totally right in the way that you phrased the question, at any rate. Why would everybody start jumping up and down saying you got to reboot after one bad movie? After one movie that struggles? After just one, why would you panic and say that an entire franchise has to be rebooted? Here's the problem. The problem is that the trouble Warner Brothers and DC are having right now, the trouble extends far beyond Justice League. Look, I said this on the show the other day. The main reason that Justice League struggled at the box office is because that was basically a public referendum on what the audience thought of Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad. That's what it is. The main cause of the sub $100 million opening for Justice League, the main cause for the lowest opening weekend in the history of these DCEU films was Batman vs. Superman. That's the main cause. Because people say, no, it's because Junkie XL's music got taken out. Guess what? The general movie-going audience has no idea if the movie's good or bad until they go see it opening weekend. Once people see it opening weekend, that's fine. Then it's up to the quality of the movie for how good its legs are going to be and word of mouth and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, people decided not to see this movie before it opened. And the main reason for that, the vast majority of the movie-going audience doesn't know anything about Zack Snyder or Joss Whedon. The vast majority of the movie-going audience doesn't care about this and care about that and all that kind of stuff. They just know they went to go see Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad, two films that I liked. But just because I like them doesn't mean I'm insecure and that I can't admit, nope, there were a lot of people out there that didn't like those films. Okay. And we saw the same thing happen with Transformers, right? Like this newest Transformers movie, like tanked at the box office. Why? Because you put out a couple of Transformers movies in a row that ticked off the audience. They paid the money, go see these Transformers movies, and they end up hating those Transformers movies. So when the next Transformers movie finally comes up, it finally caught up to Paramount. For putting out these terrible Transformers movies, it finally caught up to them and bit them in the ass, and you finally start to see this huge dip in the amount of money that the franchise made. The problem that Warner Brothers and DC is facing is not just this one movie. The problem is what this one movie has shown them, which is the average movie-going audience has lost faith in this franchise. I haven't. I like it. But you and I, as fans of it and people who like it, we have to be secure enough to go, okay, but we have to admit the facts that are clear. It is becoming clear that a lot of the audience out there did not like these films. And so now you have this foundation. You have a DCEU that has 5 films in its foundation. One of them has been received really well, unanimously by critics, audiences, box office, everything. That's Wonder Woman. 4 out of the 5 have been divisive at best. and torn apart at worst. You know, Man of Steel, which I love, Batman vs. Superman, Suicide Squad, and now you got Justice League. So it's there, when you hear people out there saying, and I'm not sure if total reboot is the answer. I'm not sure about that. Right? It's an option. I'm not sure that that's the answer, though, at this point. But the reason you're hearing people say things like that is not because of the one movie. It's not that. It's what the one movie has told us about how the audience is viewing the entire franchise as a whole. And that's hard to get around. So that's really the big issue. And if it was just about the one movie, you'd be totally right. If this was an MCU situation, where MCU puts out movie after movie that has high audience ratings, high critic ratings, and makes pretty good bank at the box office, you know, whether even their tinier movies, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, things like that, are still making respectable money at the box office for what those movies are. If they put out one real bad one, well, then you don't cancel the MCU over one real bad one. Unfortunately, the Warner Brothers and the DCEU is in a different situation right now. It's not that they can't come. 10 years from now, we could be talking about how Warner Brothers movies are kicking Marvel movies' asses. Absolutely, that can totally happen. I expect that to happen. Everything happens in ebbs and flows. Everything comes in cycles. I'm sure that day is coming. But right now, we are in a cycle where the audience as a whole has not been thrilled with the DCEU. Critics have clearly not, as a whole, have not been thrilled with the DCEU. And you know, we're seeing what should have been one of the biggest box office openings in history. Justice League opens as the lowest money-making movie of DC's history. For opening weekend, at any rate. It's all those things that are so concerning that makes a lot of people go, not necessarily me, but a lot of people go, hey, look, it's time to reboot this. Like your foundation, you've lost the audience. You're not going to win them back. Time to reboot. Hey, look, they did it with Hulk. They did it multiple times with Spider-Man. You can reboot and come back bigger and better and stronger than ever. And right now, I think there's a lot of a lot of DC fans who are now in that camp. I think there's a lot of DC fans who are now like, look, we tried this. It didn't work. We're not getting everybody else on board. Cut our losses. Reboot this thing. Let's come back bigger, badder, better than ever. And maybe they can do that. Maybe they won't. Maybe Warner Brothers has a great plan for recovering and not having to reboot. Look, there's some very smart people over at Warner Brothers. So maybe they've got a great plan. We'll have to see how that all turns out. All right. Let's move on now to the final email question of the day. And then once I'm done this final email question, guys, I'm going to be going to those of you who are watching live. I'm going to be going to your live comments and questions. Start getting your tweets ready. Simply tweet into me at John Campea. All right, let's go to the final email question of the day. And this is going to be a controversial and a little bit of I'm sure, one that we have some healthy debate on. This one comes to us from Dhruv, who writes, "Hey, John, a lot of people are angry that Warner Brothers cut Zack Snyder's vision and demand that they get a director's cut because there are a lot of people demanding they get a director's cut because they believe Joss or WB ruined the movie. They even have a petition. My question is, do you think Warner Brothers will do this? Personally, I think Joss and Warner Brothers were just as dedicated to Justice League as Zack." All right, well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yep, for those of you who don't know, there's a petition going around, because petitions are such a great use of time. There's a petition going around, which never changed anything in the movie world, by the way. There's a petition going around asking for Zack Snyder's cut of the movie. And hey, you know what? As much as I will criticize the use of petitions in the movie world, the studios are not going to listen to your petition. All right, just let's be straight about that. Studios are not listening to your petition. All right. However, if you're a film fan, and you know there's something you feel passionate about, that's a very constructive way to express your frustration. Is do a petition. As long as you understand it ain't going to result in anything, but it is a healthy outlet for expressing what it is that you as a film fan feel. On that level, I applaud the petition. Because as a film fan, you want to let your voice be heard that I wanted this as a film fan. And as a film fan, somebody who pays your money to go to see a movie theater, that's your right to be able to express your voice to the film industry to say what it is that you as a consumer, what you want. It's a healthy thing. As long as you understand it ain't ever going to amount to anything. It's positive as an outlet. As long as you realize nothing's ever going to happen as a result of it, it's just good to do it for the sake of having the outlet and letting your voice be heard. So that's fine, as long as everybody understands those parameters. Now, I read through the petition, and it's, first of all, to the people who created the petition, you made your petition way too long. Like, way too long. You didn't, it wasn't a petition. That was a manifesto, what you wrote there. Petitions, you need to keep those short, effective, and to the point to really express what the purity of what your point is and then move on. You wrote a manifesto. I mean, it's, so I doubt 10% of the people who even signed the petition even read the whole thing. So anyway, aside from that minor criticism, I read through it, and there are a lot of factual errors. Like, there are things that I think they probably read on some obscure little Reddit thread somewhere and then took it as fact and came in and wrote it in on the thing there. There's some factual errors, but still, the basic thing is this. There are fans out there that want the Zack Snyder cut because Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers ruined the movie. Okay. Let's start with a couple things, all right? Let's start with some facts. All right. Here are some facts. To suggest the underlying implication here of this petition is that Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers ruined Justice League, and it would have been so much better had they gone with Zack Snyder's vision. Now, you guys have heard me talk about Zack Snyder. I'm a big Zack Snyder fan. So there's this whole thing. Fact number one, though, that we need to wrap our heads around is this. Whether you want to admit it or not, every bit of data points to this. Both audiences and the critics liked this movie, Justice League, more than they liked Batman vs. Superman. That's indisputable. No matter which fan metric you go to, whether it's the cinema score, Justice League cinema score, which is an audience rating. Once again, cinema score is the one that they verify. They actually talk to people who actually saw the movie. No other fan score does that. Every other fan rating system allows people who haven't even seen the movie to go in and vote. But the cinema score for Justice League is higher than Batman vs. Superman was. Just is. What about the Rotten Tomatoes, both their critic and audience ratings? Well, the critic rating for Justice League is 40% right now. That's a full 13% more. That's like a 25% increase in the amount of critics who appreciated and liked Justice League more than those who appreciated and liked Batman vs. Superman. Oh God, actually, no, that's like a 50%. Going from 27 to 40 is like a 50% increase. That's close to a 50% increase in the number of critics who appreciated Justice League over the ones who appreciated Batman vs. Superman. Now, I just finished talking about how, hey, Rotten Tomatoes audience rating isn't really reliable because it allows people who haven't even seen the movie to vote and stuff like that. But I'm going to compare a Rotten Tomato audience rating to another Rotten Tomato audience rating, so at least we're comparing apples to apples, okay? The audience rating for on Rotten Tomatoes for Justice League is in the 80s. As I think the last time I checked, I think it's 85%. All right. So that may or may not mean a lot, but if you want to compare it apples to apples to another Rotten Tomatoes audience rating, compare it to the Batman vs. Superman. 63%. 63. That's like a 30% increase. Like 30% of 63. I know the math between 63 and 80, but I'm saying it's like if you take 63 and you add another 30%, you're talking about a significant increase in the amount of fans that liked Justice League over the number of fans that liked Batman vs. Superman. So, critics like Justice League more than they did Batman vs. Superman. Audience, by every metric you want to go by, the audience liked Justice League more than they liked Batman vs. Superman. But the implication and the base thesis of this entire petition is that if Zack Snyder had just made his movie, it would have been better than the one we got. Justify that. Now, granted, showing that the audience liked this movie better than Batman vs. Superman, showing that the critics like this movie more than Batman vs. Superman, that is not definitive. But it is all the information we have. And all the information we have points to the fact that there is no basis to make a claim that if Zack Snyder's version of this movie got made, it would have been better. There's no basis for that because the last one he did got a 26% critic rating and only a 63% audience rating. And by the way, that movie was 2.5 hours long. So for everybody who's saying the problem with Justice League is that it was only 2 hours long. Well, guess what? Batman vs. Superman in its first theatrical run was 2.5 hours long, and it got lower ratings from critics and from audiences. So anyway, My whole point here is simply this, is that since the basic idea of the petition, and again, I think the petition is a healthy thing for do. I applaud for people to using that as a vehicle to express their opinion. I'm all for that. But I do disagree with some of the elements of the petition, which in this sense is an underlying assumption that had Zack Snyder's vision been allowed to be carried through, it would have equaled a better movie than what we got when all the available data we have, and it's not a lot of data, but the available data we have all points to the contrary. You know, when I'm even reading some critics who hated Batman versus Superman, and some of these same critics also didn't like Justice League, but instead of really tearing Justice League a new one, they're just saying, hey, it didn't work, but it seems to be heading in the right direction. Like, even the critics who still disliked it, and 4 out of every 10 critics did like Justice League and gave it a positive review. But even the ones who didn't seem to say that they were a lot lighter on this movie than they were on Batman vs. Superman. The audience ratings are higher. So I just don't see what you think this petition is going to do. The other thing is this, and this is a big one. There seems to be this assumption in the petition that a completed, finished Zack Snyder cut of Justice League exists. It does not. I'm going to tell you right now, it does not. But John, there were these reports that he turned in this first cut. There's always a first cut. A first cut is not a finished film by any stretch of the imagination. That's just the director's first cut. Is it true that there was a first cut and that they previewed the first cut for the WB execs 6 months ago? Yes. But if you think Justice League was then done 6 months ago, I hate to break it to you, but no, it wasn't. There was a cut, but that wasn't Zack Snyder's definitive vision. First cut is never the director's definitive vision. That's just the first cut. And then they really get to it and they start the work. And he had 6 more months, not barring the tragedy that happened to his family. He would have had like months and months and months and months and months and months more to finish it off, get the VFX that he wanted done and all that kind of stuff. Instead, Warner Brothers decided this isn't the direction we want to go in. So when Joss Whedon came in, they decided, hey, we need to change directions here. And it seems like all the stuff that Joss Whedon did is the stuff that made the audience appreciate it more than they did Batman vs. Superman. Again, and I'm saying this is somebody who has defended Batman vs. Superman, who gave a positive review to Batman vs. Superman, somebody who loves Man of Steel, and somebody who really likes this director. But the reality is there's data out there that points to the fact that audiences like this movie better. There you go. Now, as far as there's another part of the petition that they wanted Junkie XL Soundtrack put back in, I would have been fine with that. I'll be honest with you. I know a lot of people really do like the soundtrack for Justice League. I got to admit, it didn't stand out to me. It didn't stand out to me. There were moments like when Superman's, and then he puts just a few bars of the John Williams score in there, bum, 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 and then it goes off into something else. That was cool. But for the most part, I found the score for Justice League kind of, unremarkable, not memorable. I could have taken or leave it, and I would have been curious to see it with Junkie XL Soundtrack instead of Danny Elfman's. I don't think it would have made a night or day difference to the movie as a whole. And Danny Elfman is clearly a very established, great composer in his own right. But I would have been down to hearing Junkie XL's thing, sure, absolutely. But we're not going to see a Zack Snyder cut. Look, never say never. It's possible, I guess. But the amount of money that Warner Brothers would have to put into it to create a Zack Snyder cut, I just don't think it's financially viable for them to do it. So, personally, I don't see it happening. All right, guys, listen, I told you I would be now going to your live questions. I'm going to do that right now. Start sending in your tweets. Now, but first, before we get to those tweets, it's time for my daily little commercial break where I do my shameless plug for the one thing that even makes this channel possible, which are my Patreon supporters. Check this out. We'll be back in 1 minute. For those of you who have followed me for any period of time, you guys know that I made the decision recently to leave the corporate overlords. I no longer wanted to work for corporations. I wanted to be an independent content creator. And the only way I've been able to do that is by the support of my Patreon supporters. So what I would like to do is to ask you guys who watch my shows, who spend any amount of time with me every single month, to consider going over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you'll get all the information about what exactly does it mean to be a Patreon supporter of mine? What does being a Patreon supporter do for helping to make sure that shows like this one and all the other shows I do here on my channel can actually be produced? And on top of that, what benefits are there to being a Patreon supporter? And maybe if you guys can check that out, if you decide you want to be one of my Patreon supporters, that would be awesome. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine too. I'm just happy that you guys have decided to be here today and be a fellow movie fan and join us in the conversation. So go and check out the website, see if you want to become a Patreon supporter. And now, let's get back. And we are back. Thanks a lot, guys, and a special thank you to all of you guys who are already Patreon supporters of mine. Again, you guys are directly responsible for us being able to do this show. Thank you so much for that. All right, it is time for us now to go to the live tweet. So let me open up my message board here, get this all set up so I can start pulling your tweets. And we are going to start our first one with, if I can find it, there it goes. The first tweet comes to us from GoCaps7911, writes, John, hey John, whatever happened to Die Hard Year 1? It died hard. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know what they're talking about, there was some buzz, what, a year or two ago, where Bruce Willis and they were talking about they're going to do this Die Hard Year 1, this kind of like a prequel and flashes back and forth to modern time. It's going to have Bruce Willis and somebody playing a young John McClane and all this kind of stuff. The backlash from those announcements, though, was palatable. I mean, you could like feel, pardon me, the backlash in the air. Audiences hated it. Now, it was right on the heels of, what was the name of the last Die Hard? Die Hard Harder with the dies and the hard, whatever the name of the last Die Hard movie was. So, and people generally hated that movie. And so then hot on the heels of that comes down, we're going to do this Die Hard Year 1. And the audience, just the backlash against that announcement was just, you could feel it in the air. And people hated it. And what happened is there was no more announcements. It just quietly died. Just quietly died and went away. I don't think we're ever going to see that. Now, look, I just said that. 5 p.m. tonight. Announcement, a brand new Die Hard movie, Die Hard Year 1. No, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think that thing is dead. They've shelved it. I think they put that thing away. All right, let's move on now to the next one. And this one comes to us from Caleb Colatter, who writes, John, I think there's a possibility that Justice League will see a surge this weekend since there's a ton of people traveling this weekend. Do not bet on it. Do not bet on it. Could it get a surge? What do you mean by surge? Like, let's put it this way. I'll be shocked. And hey, it would be a good shock because you know me, I like Justice League. I will be shocked if it only drops 50%. I will be shocked if it only drops 50%. Because not only is it not getting great word of mouth, and the critic reviews are terrible. Well, the critic reviews aren't terrible. Again, 4 out of every 10 do like it, 6 out of every 10 don't. So it's not like it's horrible. There's this perception going around that the critics are destroying this movie. No, they're not. I mean, really, if you've got 10 critics in a room, because, 60% negative, 40% positive, that means if just one other critic changed their opinion from it being a bad movie to being a good movie, now it's completely evenly split. It would be 50-50 on each side, right? So 4 out of every 10 like it, 6 out of every 10 don't. I don't think there's some odd critics destroying it, and then there's some odd critics really praising it. But, roughly speaking, I think it's at 60-40, I think it's fair to say it's generally split, obviously leaning more towards the negative. Anyway. But with Justice League doesn't have like this huge, like Thor Ragnarok kind of word of mouth. It's not having this huge Wonder Woman kind of word of mouth. It's getting tarnished a bit, and there's a lot of stuff in the news about it. And then Coco opens this weekend. Coco's going to open probably to like 50+ million. And keep this in mind. The number 2 movie this weekend when Justice League opened to $94 million, all right? The number 2 movie only made $27 million, all right? This coming weekend, you bet your ass Coco's going to make more than $27 million. It was not going to make 70, 80, 90 million, but it's going to make in the 50s or higher. And that's a lot more box office bucks being sucked in by a black hole than Justice League had going against us last week. So look, maybe it's possible, but I would say if you're Warner Brothers and this movie takes just a 50% drop, that's reason to party. That's reason to celebrate, because I think it's going to be in the 60 or higher percentage drop off. That's what I think. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it does have this kind of a surge, but I do not think it's going to have that surge. I mean, it would be great if it does. Let's see what happens. All right. Next one comes to us from Justice Green 23, who writes, John, great movie reviews, man. Thank you so much. Which movie did you like more, Batman vs. Superman or Justice League? Keep up the great work. I like Justice League more, and I like Batman vs. Superman. I think they both have their issues. I think they both have their problems. But I thought, except for the Batman character, which I thought the Batman character was infinitely better in Batman vs. Superman. I have issues with the way they treated Batman in Justice League. I mentioned this on yesterday's show, but let me mention it again because it's worth it. One of the reasons I've been hailing the Ben Affleck Batman as the best version of Batman we've ever had is because in Justice League, or I should say in Batman versus Superman, they got, and Ben Affleck got, that the Batman mask is not his mask. Bruce Wayne is the mask, right? You guys have heard me say this a lot lately. Bruce Wayne died in that alley with his parents, and Batman was born. And who Ben Affleck is in the movie as the Bruce Wayne character, when he's wearing that mask, that's his true identity. That's who that person really is. And when he doesn't have the cowl on, that fleshy skin known as Bruce Wayne, that's the fake mask. And it came across that way, and I loved it. I ate it up. In Justice League, they retconned that a little bit. And they made it feel more like, no, Bruce Wayne is who he really is. And then just when he needs to be Batman, he puts on the mask and growls his voice. And now I'm Batman. But his true identity is Bruce Wayne. And that's a complete opposite of what they did in Batman vs. Superman. Other than that, I actually like Justice League a little bit more. I think I like Justice League a bit more. That's just my opinion, though. What do you guys think? All right, let's move on to the next question. And this next one comes to us from Timothy803, who writes, John, would Coco be a good movie to see on a date? I'm worried it would be too depressing and sad. Hey, look, is there some sad things in it? Yes, but honestly, the movie, it makes your heart sing. It's a wonderful movie. It's great, and it's got great emotional elements, like really good emotions. Great stuff about family. The music in context is wonderful. I adored Coco. I really did. And so, yeah, I will say yes. I think Coco's a really good date movie. It's not just about death and dying and depression. It's not that at all. It is an uplifting movie. I think you should check it out. Let's see. This one comes to us from B-Man1881, who writes, John, is there any shows that you love that got canceled after one season? Mine is Freaks and Geeks. Actually, there is one. Who's the guy who played Malfoy? Not the kid, but his father. I'm trying to remember. He's on Star Trek Discovery right now. Anyway, and I cannot remember the name of the show. For those of you in the chat board, maybe you can remember this. Those of you in the chat board. Oh my God, and somebody's using Super Chat. Thank you so much, guys. Who was it that just used Super Chat? Andrew Shiver just put in a Super Chat. Thank you so much, man. For those of you in the chat board, what was that show? Jason Isaacs is the actor. Yes. Thank you very much, the Flick Critic. Jason Isaacs is the actor. He had a show out about 2 or 3 years ago that was 1 season long. And the basic idea of the show was that Awake! Yes, it was called, thank you, Devontae Brown. The show was called Awake. Okay, it was an amazing premise. Okay, so here's the story, okay? I'm sure you can find it on a streaming service somewhere. It's only lasted 1 season, which is a total shame, but just watch it. Even though it cuts off because the season ended, it's worth the watch. Here is the basic idea. I believe it was called Awake. And the idea was this. So Jason Isaacs, he's a cop, okay? And he's got a wife and a teenage son, both that he loves completely. And they get into a terrible car accident. And in the car accident, his wife dies. Okay? Now, some time has passed. When he goes to sleep and wakes up after one of these days, the world is completely different. Now, I can't remember how much time ago, whether it was 6 months ago or a year ago. Instead of a year ago, his wife dying in the car accident, he's in the exact same reality, except it's his son who died in the accident. Everything else in his world is exactly the same, except for that big problem. And then, once he goes to bed and goes to sleep, when he wakes up again the next day, he's back in the world where his wife died and his son is still there. Goes to sleep the next day, it's the opposite. Goes to sleep the next day, it's the opposite. And he uses information about each of the two worlds to help solve crimes in it, but also try to figure out a way to try to get both of his family back and all that. It was a wonderful premise for a show. Such a great, original, well-acted. Jason Isaacs is great in it. And that show ended after 1 season. I get why, because people didn't watch it. People, I guess, couldn't kind of get the idea of it when they first saw commercials for it and never checked it out. I get it. That's fine. And it didn't work out. But that was a show I really wanted to see a season 2 for. And I was really kind of bummed out that it got canceled after 1 season because I was really enjoying that show. Okay, let's go to this next one. Let's see. This one comes to us from Puni256 writes, John, thoughts about the Tony Starkification of Batman in Justice League? Well, I mean, look, the Tony Stark and the Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne characters, they've always borne a lot of similarities. It's just that the real Bruce Wayne is Batman, and with Iron Man, the real Iron Man is Tony Stark. That's been the big difference. But there was a lot of the same thing about them. And again, I'm not thrilled. I didn't hate Batman in Justice League, but I'm not thrilled with what they did with him in Justice League. Let's see. What's next? This one comes to us from Andy, who writes, John, if Justice League makes $94 million, what will Aquaman make? Much less? Well, look, here's the good thing about Aquaman being over a year away. There are no less than 6 major comic book movies that are going to come out between now and when Aquaman comes out. All right? We've got Black Panther. We've got Avengers Infinity War. We got Ant-Man and the Wasp. We've got New Mutants. We got X-Men. We got Deadpool 2. And there might be 1 or 2 others. But minimum, you got 6 other major comic book movies coming out between now and when Aquaman comes out. That can work in Warner Brothers' favor. That can work in Aquaman's favor. Because hopefully by that point, everybody's loving all the comic book movies in theaters. And, you know, if they're an audience member who has a bad taste in their mouth because of Justice League, that was over a year ago. Maybe they'll have gotten over it by then. And maybe this long gap can actually help Aquaman. So let's wait and see for the trailers and see what James Wan does with this. Because, I mean, it could exceed. It could exceed the $100 million mark. I mean, we'll just have to wait and find out. But I think this 1 year gap could work in its favor. So let's see how that turns out. All right, next one comes to us from Louis C. 9515 writes, John, do you think we will ever get Man of Steel 2? Henry Cavill still has 1 more movie in his contract. That would be cool. Well, look, remember, it is important to keep in mind that the Hollywood contracts very much work one way. Just because somebody signs like a 3-picture deal doesn't mean the studio has to use them in 3 pictures. It just means that the actor has to appear in 3 pictures if the studio wants them. Okay? A great example of that is Terrence Howard. Like Terrence Howard, who was Rhodey in the MCU, he still had like 2 more films on his contract, but Marvel decided to replace him with Don Cheadle. But John, he still had 2 more films on his contract. Doesn't matter. That just means that Marvel has the choice to use him and he has to come in and play the role if they want him. That doesn't mean they have to use him in it, though. And with Henry Cavill, and you know me, I love Henry Cavill's Superman. Henry Cavill is Superman. He may have another film on his contract, but that doesn't mean DC or Warner Brothers has to use him for anything. If I had to make a guess right now, I don't think we're getting Man of Steel 2. And that breaks my heart because, you know, I put Man of Steel in the top 10 best comic book movies of all time. I think it is tragically underappreciated. I think it is tragically misunderstood. I think it is a brilliant film of the genre. I love Man of Steel. And it hurts me to say that I don't think, I don't know this. This is not coming from any insider information. I simply don't think we're going to be getting a Man of Steel 2. I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. Hopefully I'm wrong. You and I can throw big parties if we find out I'm wrong. That would be awesome. Let's see. This one. Rainman143 writes, John, I felt like they completely changed the tone of Batman and Justice League and it didn't fit Affleck. I completely agree. Completely agree. They totally changed the work on Ben and his Batman. HNEB writes, John, Coco or Inside Out? Thanks. Keep up the great work. Very different movies. I love both of these movies. I'm going to give a slight edge. I'm going to call it a draw. Like they're both wonderful. They both have beautiful sentimentality. They both have great laughs. They both have great, really feel-good stories and moments and wonderful characters. I'm going to call it a draw. I know that's kind of like kind of dodging the question, but really, I can't pick one. I really can't. Let's see. This one. And Nathan Vandor writes, John, do you think John Krasinski would have been a good casting for Shazam? Could have been. I mean, John Krasinski and Zachary Levi, they have a lot of things in common. Like when you look at the way they perform on screen and things like that, even their physical look is very similar. Could he? Sure. There are 100 actors out there who could have been a great Shazam. Is John Krasinski one of them? Sure. Yeah. John Krasinski's one. I like John Krasinski a lot, to be honest. All right. This next one comes to us from rdrago66 who writes, with Justice League having the biggest Sunday to Monday drop for any DCEU film, is this a sign of things to come for this weekend? I'll be honest with you. I did not hear about that statistic about it being the biggest Sunday to Monday drop. I haven't heard that, so I can't verify that that's true. I'm not doubting you. I'm just saying I can't verify that myself that that's true. If that is true, and if it has a huge Sunday to Monday drop-off like that, then yes, that bodes very, very badly for any upcoming weekends that they have coming. So let's just cross our fingers and hope that the damage gets mitigated. Let's see. Last question I'll take for the day. And this last question comes to us from Lord Icon 5, who writes, John, should Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Justice League be more of a trilogy and continue with the same actors in different universe? I'll be honest with you. I'm not even really quite sure what the question is that you're asking, to be honest. So I'm going to take one more. And the last one I'm going to take today is from Nathan Vandor, who writes, John, worst movie to win Best Picture at the Oscars. I'd have to think about it. The fact of the matter is there's never been a bad movie that's won Best Picture at the Oscars. Which is the worst one? Again, I'd have to sit down with a big list of Oscar winners and really try to kind of figure it out. And that would take me some time. I can't do that right now off the top of my head. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's always a treat to be able to get together with fellow film fans and talk about this stuff. Hey, I was mentioning this. It's the countdown to 100,000. Last night, the John Campea YouTube channel crossed 99,000 subscribers. We are now about 900 away from hitting 100,000, which I didn't think would happen till earliest, like August of 2018. Most likely November or December of 2018 is when I thought we would hit 100,000, but it looks like we're going to hit it probably in the next week or so. So if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet and you just come over here every day to watch the show, do me a favor, click that subscribe button, become a subscriber, click the thumbs up on the button down there, leave a comment or a thought. Remember, the people we're debating with and the people you're having exchanges with, we're all on the same side. We're all movie fans. Let's treat each other as such. Make sure you guys follow me on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. Of course, check out my Patreon page if that's something you want to consider doing. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. My name is John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.